I will rely on certain definition of engaged act in some way, probably with some modification of probably visitor perspective, and try to conceptualize in a way I could some problems that I saw, try to understand in engaged acts, and especially I'm interested, are engaged acts actually individual or collective, and in which way this could be prescribed plural subject? Because I think when we say that they're just individual acts, it's something is not actually real. And when we try to say that they're collective acts, it is also problematic. So I will argue someday that they are something between individual and collective acts, and I'll try to explain why it is, why I want to explain it in such a way. And I will use some notion that's my thesis, and which is probably fruitful and probably not. I expect your feedback on this, that we should introduce something like empty intention of we, which I will explain in which content, in which context, and why I think it's important, probably not only to understand engaged acts, but to understand how sociality and groups function. So, first definition I use, which can better, is that engaged acts are social acts which mobilize or obligate, but not in a strict sense, obligate in the sense that it push or engage others and potentially, or in order to establish institutionalize a group. I have to say that I here make a difference between what I call pure form of engaged acts. And pure form of engaged act will be that you are from nothing creating a group, let's say, and what will I call engaged acts in context, and engaged acts in contents usually happen in already established group, but I think that these groups are fragile. You usually need to act more, to engage others, to mobilize, or to make appropriate rules which make us be together. And that's what I want to say. I will mostly speak about pure form of engaged acts, because I think this pure form help us to explain what are engaged acts in context. But in this sense, I want to say that I'm not claiming that in such what I explain in actual situation there is no prior pre-reflexive plural self-awareness or micro-interaction or some sociality. I just want to see a pure form and structure of it, and then to see how it could apply. So there are two obvious problems. The first problem is that this act could not be classified in strict conditions as acts of plural subject in any way, and how potentially all, especially how these who are absent could be in any way obligated. So when we look at some strict arguments about, I call it strict in epistemological demands, like Margaret Gilbert, it is obviously that for her conditions are unity of the will, and additionally there is what might be called expression condition. Each must have manifested his willingness of unity openly to the others, and the common knowledge condition. This manifestation of willingness must be common knowledge, and it's obvious that one tried to act in order to mobilize others. There are no such kind of conditions. The other didn't express agreement, or the other have not this knowledge in a symmetric way. It is, as Mark said yesterday, kind of weak asymmetry where engaged B, and it is not necessary that B engaged A. So it doesn't fulfill it, simply doesn't fulfill conditions for being a plural subject, but there are different arguments. I will say just the two that doesn't presuppose such kind of expression or common knowledge condition in a strict sense. For example, Ham argued that one need not to be aware of belonging to a group. It's enough that joint evaluative perspective is implicit in rational pattern of emotion, so he's acting as belonging to a group. That's enough to speak about plural agency. And of course, with the pre-reflective awareness argument from Schmid, it's also easier to skip some of the problems that we could have in the Margaret Gilbert account, but still the problem with such kind of engaged acts that ex hypothesis plural subject doesn't exist, but it is something to be established. I have to know that I will use some of Helm terminology mostly in my work. I presuppose that most of you are familiar with the notion of formal object of emotions. I will use focus in a Helm sense, that focus is object which is significant to me or to us, and according to which the other object became significant, and that for plural agents it's most important that we could speak about joint evaluative perspective, and that the joint evaluative perspective is our focus in the sense that we are acting in a such way that it is from joint evaluative perspective have what is significant for us and not for me, you, and so on. So in this way, he could correct his argument about plural agency and try to distinguish it from other arguments he called arguments about plural directedness. But, however, when we look about the engaged acts, it looks like that we must presuppose that we speak about some, at least potential, plural subject in order to make any sense about speaking of engaged acts. So, in a simple and Sartre voice, it had to be presupposed that one who performs engaged acts suspend his or her personal goals for the collective, or at least that the collective goals have the advantage. And to be more precise, here came something we already have in discussion between Sophie and Petar. I think that engaged acts have to be recognized as collective. What it means? It means that I used this notion from Robin Cameron to explain institutional acts as acts that only make sense that one perform in such a way that in order to be recognized. So when one perform engaged act, there is a sense of engaged acts only if other recognizing it and group, so respond to them. But what I think is that we cannot, of course, speak about the accidental situations or engaged acts which one perform act and it happened by accident, that it motivates other. But I think when we are interested to speak about agency-relevant acts and actions, that it's important that one, in some sense, perform this act in order to mobilize others, and that it's recognizable. And I say it is recognizable, not important to be explicit, to give expression, or to reflect on his intention to do so. It is only necessary that in any way grouping others is significant for that actor, non-reflectively, affectively, or in any way, and that other can in any way, again, recognize it, again, affectively, non-affectively, and respond to it. So, before I came to my thesis, I want to introduce some similar but opposite in a way problem that introduced by Tomer Zanto. He said that it was a problem rarely discussed in social ontology, but a big problem. He called it problem of a pure and antecedent experiential group, and defined it whether or how there can be communal phenomenal experiences without there being any actual individual member of the given experiential group or members who are experientially aware of the respective phenomenal content. In a weaker version, we can take that if it's possible that only one member is enough that we could speak about collective experience. So before I introduce his answer to this problem, I want to say that for Zanto, Paul Einstein, it's very important to distinguish shared and collective emotions. And in this way, shared emotions are emotions that we have kind of same emotion, the same formal object to same target, and we are mutually aware of having the shared emotions. But what is additional need for collective emotion, that there is a shared appraisal pattern. And what Zanto emphasizes, and it's very important, that we don't need, in shared emotions, the person with whom we share emotions must be present but in collective emotions, it is not necessary that the other persons are present, and that relate to this problem. So, he quotes Stein, who emphasizes this problem, and this we. Stein speaks about colleague who died. And this we encompasses not only those who feel the grief, as I do, but all those who are included in the group, and those who perhaps do not know of the event, and even the members of the group who lived earlier or will live later. So practically absent are included in collective experience. And what I see in Xanto as a solution he gave, and it's a bit explanation why normativity of collective experience could be fulfilled in one person, that one person, if realized rationally or non-reflectively, share the price of preference, can fulfill collective emotions. So again, Stein, if none of the members feel the appropriate grief, then one has to say that the loss is not correctly appreciated by the unit. If only one member has realized it within herself the rationally required sense content, then that no longer holds, for then the one is feeling in the name of the unit, and in her the unit has satisfied a claim placed upon it. Then that which is intended in by the others came to fulfillment in the experience of this one alone. So what is similar to the problem I want to address is certainly the kind of possibility that one have kind of collective emotions where there is kind of emptiness and absence of others. But what is opposite is something that I think that don't address and should be addressed, that, let's say, this emptiness is not so harmful because when others do not fulfill the same experience, it is something problematic, and I think this is the moment where actually justified engaged acts come in. So in his example is probably simple. Some people are not at the job, so they don't breathe, they are absent. But let's suppose we are sitting on a place where we met romantic partner and having a kind of collective emotion which sharing, which actually feeling as a unit was also our partner will feel, but it is not the same situation if he is here or not. And I think that goes also for any kind of collective emotions, except in the trivial cases. So in any moment, if we have a conference at the Institute, yeah, it's enough that I feel it as a part of a conference and fulfill normative demands to have collective emotions, but it is not the same if the other are simply want to take a walk and I talk to the anteroom. So, I will now come to the compassion, and I don't want to speak about how compassion is beautiful and we should have more compassion, but I want to take example following some arguments for Aristotle, Rousseau, and Nussbaum, and to introduce this notion of empty intention in this way. So, what we basically have when we speak about compassion, we have some person X and some situation probably which is dangerous or harmful to person X. And usually we have subject S who, for his first personal perspective, trying to emphasize his X and recognize in some way that X is in dangerous situation, and usual accounts which are more similar to empathic or sympathetic experience will count that S will probably have compassionate act to help to X, which is related to individual actions, and of course, yeah, S is individual action who care for others. Following Nussbaum, so probably most of you know the Aristotelian conditions for compassion. That's a bit different, probably. So the belief that the suffering is serious rather than trivial, the belief that the suffering was not caused primarily by the person's own culpable actions, and the belief that the pity or own possibilities are similar to those of sufferer. And these conditions, so obviously, introduced by Aristotle to find some other relation to the compassion, but to ourselves, in which Aristotle's claim, which the person himself these misfortunes are such that the person himself might expect to suffer, either himself or one of his loved ones. And in a similar vein, Rousseau argued, talking about king who probably couldn't have compassion, and then he said, making him understand well that the fate of these unhappy people can be his, that all their ills are there in the ground beneath his feet, that countless unforeseen and inventable events can plunge him into them from one moment to the next, teach him to count on neither birth, nor health, nor riches, show him all the vicissitudes of fortune. So what I think is happening with Aristotle and Rousseau, and I don't want to claim that Aristotle claimed it or Rousseau claimed it, I think that it's something they're going around it, and that for sure we could explain that something such thing happens, and that this potentially anyone could come to be seen in both Aristotle and both Rousseau. It is important that we see these misfortunes as something that could happen to potentially anyone. And in this seeing potentially anyone as those who could be stressed by this misfortune, I think could be in some way explained as a kind of anti-intention to be, which doesn't exist actually. So probably this is a kind of upgrade to what Rousseau and Aristotle actually taught, but I think it is something which is happening in our life. So this is how it looks. It doesn't that S empathizes X, it's that S have some perceived and sense in some way, we, as potentially anyone who could be harmed with this misfortune, and that X, who is actually harmed, is not just another person with whom is empathized, but it is one of us who should be helped as a group. And this situation is important, for example, in yesterday presented by Neil situation when there is a situation in which persons should be transformed in a group in order to help, which is also legalized in French penalty code. So, in my defense, probably the argument is a bit step further than what is usually argument for compassion. So, what is enough for me, I think it is something social phenomena that we think a group that should feel in this way and react accordingly as a group and as individual person. And in my defense, Nussbaum goes actually a step further. He immediately introduced changing of society. So Nussbaum writes, personal knowledge that the lot of the poor might be or became scarce, this led her to turn her thoughts outward from her own current comfortable situation to the structure of society, allocation of goods and resources. So, what I mean by this anti-we intention, well, it is not we-mode intention, it is just anti-intentionality. So, it is my focus, and when I say focus, I think the intentional relation in which this, or what I focus it on, is significant for me. On imagined we, this kind of fantasy, of those who share a joint evolutive perspective. In this example of compassion, they share evolutive perspective that this misfortune is dangerous, which contains an infinite number, because it's not defined who is actually the number of it, it could be potentially evident, of anti-slot to be fulfilled. Anti-slot is metaphor from Charles Taylor of anti-institutionality, to emphasize something important. So when I talk about empty, I don't mean it's nothing, or it's a dark hole. As Husserl said, emptiness is potentiality, the slate is potentiality. And when I talk about imagined we and anti-slots of plurality in it, I think about potentiality we take in some concrete situation to think about it. So, in this way, it is obvious that such situation doesn't create something like plural agency, and in this pure form, it doesn't create, of course, because the other doesn't participate in constructing this kind of intention, and by the nature it is not kind of plural agency, nor the V-mode intention. It is that kind of intersubjective sociality, it could say, that have potential plural subject in it as imagined. But why it is important, I think it's not trivial empty intention. Why it is not trivial? We can of course imagine whatever we want. It's not trivial because I'm aware that this intention is not fulfilled. So it is not just I'm taking some empty intention, it's probably fulfilled or not. It is a situation in which I'm aware that other is not reacting. So we could take, for example, Sartre example, but let's imagine that it is a big accident and that everyone should help, and imagine that not everyone look at that actually outside, but probably talk it on the conference about social ontology. So that there is reason in that situation to attract and to mobilize other for attention to the such happening, and to mobilize them to fulfill this kind of intention that is still empty because this plural subject still doesn't exist. And it is not trivial because of both significance of we, of this imagined joint perspective, have to me, and the fact that it is not fulfilled. This intention is immediately practical and engaged in that sense. So I'm not just sitting and imagining V because I have import of the situation that I have, but I'm immediately motivated to act practically to mobilize others. Okay, I will just shorthand with a question that I don't want to address specifically today, but it's part of things that I'm also find problematic with this kind of engaged acts, and it's justification, because it looks if everyone could go around the street and engage and pressure others, it look a bit offensive, and if it is even possible that such engaged acts exist in an open space, not just in closed groups, then it is question in which situation is anyone justified to call others to mobilize. And I think it's, like I say, engaged acts in content. So in situation when we take sociality as we have, they're usually regulated. So what is regulated? We have some intersubjective understanding of relevant formal object, or better said, adequacy of formal object. So we usually intersubjectively accept what is relevant danger in order for me to have a right to demand from the strangers to transform into a group. And that it depends, of course, of communal norms, moral norms, and so on. But in a situation when we don't have actually a group, when danger will come and the difficulty in danger will come is either either it has a rupture, as Marian and Serjan yesterday told. So situation in which we can actually not accept that someone have a right or not have a right to mobilize me, or in situation when there is no actually this kind of sociality and norms on a question we want to mobilize others. I think the only justification of my act could come along with angry, probably, from the others. Thank you.